Surprised anybody made it. I didn't know this morning if we should try it or not, and I'm sure glad we did.
We all came to see you.
Yeah, well, see, irresistible, right? Well, I'll try and make it worth your while. I think I have some pretty interesting things here to talk about. Talking about Noah's Ark and the Tower of Babel. I didn't know where to begin. Subject matter is simple. Everybody knows about Noah's Ark, and these talks are designed to look at the Bible from an archaeological perspective. And so I thought, well, what do we have that relates to Noah's Ark from that perspective? And the answer is nothing. There is no evidence of Noah's Ark, and I hope I'm not disappointing anyone that was expecting maybe I would show some pictures of wood on Mount Ararat, or there's other things that have been found. A man named Bob Cornuke claims to have found Noah's Ark up there, and the pictures, they show him standing next to a rock formation that's similar to a shape of a boat, and geologists say it's a volcanic formation of the rock, and I haven't been there myself, but I'm tending to think if it was a Noah's Ark that visible, and that everyone would agree that that's it and that we found it, but there still seems to be a lot of question. And I thought maybe there would be something I could show you. When I Googled it, at Mount Ararat, there's these big boulders at the bottom. They're maybe 15 feet high and quite large, and there's a hole in the top of them. And Bob Cornuke says they were ballast stones that were dragged under the ark with ropes. As it was floating, they could face into the waves maybe, and it would help keep the ark stable. And I thought that's a pretty good one. Otherwise, what are these 14 large rocks out there with a hole in them that would accommodate the rope? Greetings. So I thought, that is something we can look at, and that really could be connected with the ark. And there are the Byzantine period, they carved crosses in these, and there is a religious connotation. The traditions are that they are from Noah's Ark in the area. But then when I was downloading pictures of these with the hole in the top and thinking this is great, I've got something at least, proof of Noah's Ark. And I downloaded some pictures. Well, once in a while I'll get a picture and click to go to the story it came from. Well, one of these I did that, and it wasn't one of those 14 at the bottom of Mount Ararat. It was from another area nearby. And so I looked at the article, and it was the very same shaped stones, about the same size, and they had a hole near the top. Only this time there were 200 of them. So now I'm getting a little bit suspicious or uncomfortable thinking these 14 maybe are connected with the ark. And then I read that over the years different colleges studied these and found that if you view through the holes, the spring and winter, the equinox, there's certain planets that meet the horizon, and these holes, all of them are connected with this astronomy. And so I want to say those rocks are probably not connected with Noah's Ark either. So I'm really coming up with nothing to show you proof of Noah's Ark. What I do have, though, well, first of all, I wanted to review a little bit. See if I can get this to click. There we are. Last time, I want to review a little bit from last time. We talked about the early literary methods, how the old tablets, if we compared them to Genesis, the narrative, that we saw some parallels indicating that maybe Genesis was originally rendered on tablets. It's still a theory, and I want to keep studying that. And I've laid out this study last month and this time as if this is factual. And so we will be studying the different tablets is how I'm going to present it. Genesis 5:1, a reminder, it says, "This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him." Here the word sefer, translated book, means writing or to inscribe. And also the Greek version of the Bible, the Septuagint, renders chapter 2:4. "This is the book of the generation of the heaven and earth." And so they include the book in that one as well. And so the earliest records of Genesis, therefore, claim to have been written down. So that's another case for them having been tablets originally. Moses shared his sources. We did talk about this, that he indicated the source of the information available to him and names the persons who originally possessed the writings from which he gained his knowledge. And then we saw what we called colophons, or title pages, and they would appear at the end of what was written on their tablet, as opposed to the title being at the beginning. And so the account of creation, the colophon ended up in 2:4, Genesis 2:4. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth. And then 5:1, Genesis 5:1 was another one. This is the book of the generations of Adam, which I believe the preceding above where that was written was the record that Adam put down on tablet. That was his tablet, and it was the account of the garden experience and so forth. And then Genesis 6:9 was another one of these colophons. These are the generations of Noah. And the things that were written above that were how the world had become so corrupt, and the Lord was not happy with his creation. Now we're going to move ahead to another colophon, is at Genesis 10:1a. And this would be the tablet or the records of the sons of Noah. So these are the generations of the sons of Noah, would begin where Noah's ended in 6:9. So we start at the second part of 6:9. Why don't we go there now? Genesis 6:9, the second half of that verse. And Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And this section ends with, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So I believe what we're about to study is from what they would have written, or their records. And then, of course, all of this was copied by Moses and ends up in our Bible. And we think that Moses was able to do this during the wandering in the Exodus. That would be when he referred to these records and put them down for us to read today. Before we finish tonight, we'll have covered the generations of Shem, so it would be Shem's tablet, and also the generations of Terah, which, for those of you who know about Abraham, that's Abraham's father. And so we'll be reading some from his records as well. Okay, and the last bit of review here, we went through Genesis 2:4. It was the study of creation. Then the book of the generations of Adam, ending in Genesis 5:1. And I wanted to include this. I didn't discuss this last time. Genesis 4:15, this is included in Adam's records. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And in Genesis 4:23 and 24, as we read further down, the generations here, these are relatives of Cain now. And Lamech said unto his wives Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And I'm bringing this to your attention because it shows what mankind, how it was developing and going downhill. Cain had killed Abel, and his punishment was to be thrown out of the area, and he was worried that the punishment is more than he can bear. And God said, I'll tell you what, I'll put a mark that no one will hurt you, or it'll come back on them sevenfold. So in a way, Cain was protected. Well, Cain had children and more children and grandchildren, and as the family grew, they all had this attitude, we've got the mark and no one can touch us. And look, by the time it gets down here to Lamech, who is contemporary with Noah's father, he's saying that he could kill someone and not suffer any consequences. Well, this was the mentality at the time of the flood of a lot of the population at that time. They could do anything they wanted to. I'll move on here. The generations of Noah we talked about, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil. And it repented the Lord, he had made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. I wanted to mention the seed of Abel. He was killed by Cain, but Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. For God, said she, had appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So if Cain was ungodly or humanistic or associated with evil, then Seth was like his brother Abel, who did what the Lord willed and cooperated, and as his son Enos, it says men began to call upon the name of the Lord. So I think that maybe Cain and his descendants maybe didn't rely on God and acknowledge, him as the creator and give him the glory so much. And I think that maybe Seth and his family, as we know, his family goes right on down. I think it's in Matthew. Well, it is in Matthew. He can trace Jesus Christ's lineage, back to Seth, through Seth, all the way to Adam. So this is a godly line, and that's why I bring that up. I'm going to talk about a contrast now. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. I read this commentary by John Lang. It's an old book. I collect old books. This one's 1868, but I thought this was really interesting. He said, Noah is not only the last of the Sethic patriarchs at the end of the antediluvian period, he is, moreover, the first of the new through the patriarchal line that goes on in Shem. And in this representation, is he also a type of the future Christ, the finisher of the old, the author of the new world? To Noah and his house there is formed a contrast in the race of his time and in the old form of the earth that had been corrupted by it. So Noah, having come down from the line of Seth, the godly line, he still held on and to the good things, and was, in contrast to the rest of the world. Everyone else had gone the other way. The generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is from what would be the tablet of Noah's sons. Genesis 6:12, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Delitzsch is a theologian from the 1850s, and he is quoted here by John Lang. Delitzsch correctly points out the contrast of these words to chapter 131. Everything stood in sharpest contradiction with that good state which God the Creator had established. God's looking or seeing denotes a final sentence. The earth was incurably corrupt. And in Genesis 1:31, we see the opposite of 6:12. I'm going to read 6:12 again. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Genesis 1:31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So we see this contrast from good to bad. Genesis 6:13 and 14, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. The gopher wood, the scholars, the different commentaries, every one of them says it's cedar wood. And the rooms, another word for rooms was cells. So there were places for the animals on the ark. Now, I had discussed what I couldn't find, archaeologically speaking, but this is something that I did find, and I'll just read what this says. This is from the British Museum. It's from the library of Ashurbanipal. It's a fragment of a clay tablet, and it's the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of the flood. So here's a Babylonian account of a flood. And the date of this is 7th century BC, which is actually the 600s, maybe the time the Babylonians took Jerusalem, if you want to relate it to that. So this tablet is from that time, and it's a copy of earlier tablets that they have found that date back to the time of Moses. So there's this account of a flood by the Babylonians, and so I thought this would be fun to compare what this says along with Scripture. And I'll just tell you before we even start, it's amazing parallels. And so the question is, what does that mean? And the world today, and scholars and everybody wants to say, well, that shows that Genesis, the account of the flood, was copied from these tablets. Is that what you all think?
No.
I don't think so. And so I think it's a proof that our Bible is talking about a historical event. It actually happened. And this is their crude attempt to write down, their version of it. And they had these tablets to copy, the tablets of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And by the way, these crude Babylonian tablets are filled with extra things, names of gods and demons and places and stories and traditions, myths, and the Bible version is so simple and clean. I think common sense would say Genesis would have been the first copy, the clean, almost like an outline, and then all this extra things would have been added to the copies, later copies. So let's get started, and maybe we won't do all of these. I thought I didn't rehearse this, so we can try a few of these and see how it moves along. The first line we're going to look at says, "Frame the house, build a ship, leave what thou canst, seek life." And I have that compared to Genesis 6:14, the first part. "Make thee an ark of gopher wood." We just read that. "Room shalt thou make, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch." I'm going to try another one. "And bring all the seed of life into the midst of the ship." 6:19. "And of every living of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female." Here's another. "As for the ship which thou shalt build," and it's broken off, so there's blanks here, but "cubits shall be in measurement its length," and again broken off, "cubits the extent of its breadth and its height." And I think it's still significant, even though we don't know how many cubits, because it says, "As for the ship thou shalt build," it talks about its measurement, its length, its breadth, and its height. If we look at Genesis 6:15, "And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. So you see the similarities there. And I'm going to move on down to this one. One of the lines says, 6 sars of bitumen I poured over the outside. 3 sars of bitumen I poured over the inside. Well, you know, we already read, where was that? 6:14. And shall pitch it within and without with pitch. So bitumen and pitch, it's the same thing. They made it watertight. And so the parallels are many. I'll move on. Let's see here. I'll try this one. Enter into the ship and shut thy door. That's Genesis 7:1. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. They both enter into the ship. We may talk about this later, but I'm going to mention this now. I think it's significant that chapter 7 says, And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark. So the Lord is speaking and saying, Come into the ark. So where is that voice? Where is the Lord when He's saying that? He's in the ark. He's saying, Come in the ark. And when we get to the end of this, and He tells them to go, He says, Go forth. And so He's still in there. And another fact that we'll discuss later is that, and maybe I shouldn't say it so soon, but I'm going to talk about it. Does anyone know how long they were on the ark? From when they got in and shut the door to when they walked off the ark? The Lord was there. He said, Come in. And when they were done, He said, Go forth. So Noah and his family were with the Lord for how long? Does anyone know?
A year?
A year. That's it. It's it. It's a year. And I don't know why I always thought 40 days and 40 nights.
That's the rain period.
What's that?
Let it wait and dry. That's how long it rains.
Yeah. And then it had to, it took a long time to dry out and be habitable, and they had to stay safe. I had no idea. I was startled when I learned that. I had to check other commentaries, and they all agree. Well, and then you read the scripture, and it becomes clear when they went in. We're going to study this later. It gives the, second month, 27th day, and then, after the flood, second month, 27th day, same kind of thing. So it's not hard to figure out. It's just something, I don't know why they don't teach it to everyone more regularly. I would like to have known that long ago. Let's try another one here. The tablet says, during 6 days and nights rages the wind, the flood and the storm devastate. The seventh day when it arrived, the flood ceased, the storm. Genesis 7:12 says, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And Genesis 7:17, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. Another line says, rested, the sea subsided, and the tempest of the deluge was ended. 8:1 says, and God remembered Noah and everything, living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. So the sea subsided. That agrees with Scripture also. The tablet here says, I looked for the people, or Udma, with a cry of lamentation, but all mankind had turned again to clay. And the biblical version here, 721. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle and of beast and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. I did read some commentaries that suggested that the flood was regional. And I thought about that, and I'm not quite so sure myself how to deal with that. I want to believe that it was the entire globe and the mountaintops and everything underwater. But the arguments were interesting, and they talked about how mankind, as the generations from Cain and Seth and those families, that they really hadn't expanded too far from, let's say, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. Certainly they had gone as far as Egypt, south, and this would have had to at least covered to there and up to Mount Ararat, northern Israel and Turkey, and I mean, for anything to cover that great amount, an area, it must have pretty much covered everything. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that it is discussed in some of the commentaries, that possibility. So I'll just leave it at that for now. But there's no doubt that all men were killed, other than the 8 souls on the ark. Genesis 7:21. And every man. The next line on the tablet, I opened the window and daylight fell upon my cheeks. Genesis 8:6. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. So there's another parallel with the window being opened. You just have to believe one was copied from the other. And I think we know which was copied from which. I beheld a shore beyond the sea. Toward the 12th point rose land. And Genesis 8:5. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. So another parallel there. Now I'm going to look at other archaeological evidence. If I can get that to turn. Well, what do you think, David? The everything looks normal. I'm going to talk about Ur and the flood evidence in Ur. The Persian Gulf as the beginning of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and Ur, where they believe Abraham lived, is in the southern part of that area. It's interesting. Oh, now it's red. Let's see.
What's that?
Maybe the battery, it's red now. Okay, bear with me. Yeah, it just stays red, seems like. But yeah, Leonard Woolley from, he was an archaeologist, and he dug in Ur, and he found what he called evidence of the flood. And so now we have something other than the Babylonian tablet. And I'll read what he wrote. Another old book I have, 1929, Ur of the Chaldees by Leonard Woolley. The shafts went deeper, and suddenly the character of the soil changed. Instead of stratified pottery and rubbish, we were in perfect, clean clay, uniform throughout, the texture of which showed that it had been laid there by water. The clean clay continued without change until it had attained a thickness of a little over 8 feet. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped, and we were once more in layers of rubbish, full of stone implements, flint cores from which implements had been flaked off, and pottery. So he's describing stratified pottery, arrowheads, flint chips, and pottery, and suddenly they hit clay as they go down, and there's no artifacts at all. 8 feet later, through the clay, they start finding more flint and pottery. And the pottery below the clay had a characteristic of the early bronze pottery was painted, and the flint tools and so forth allow archaeologists to date sites, and this was, it fits the time before the flood, and so it shows that there was this occupation there, and then 8 feet of clay, and then it was occupied again. And I'll keep reading. The great bed of clay marked, if it did not cause, a break in the continuity of history. Above it we had pure Sumerian civilization. Below it there was a mixed culture of which one element was Sumerian and the other of that Al-Ubaid type, which seems nothing to do with the Sumerians but to belong to the race which inhabited the river valley before the Sumerians came to it. And Woolley also wrote, the bed of water-laid clay could only have been the result of a flood. No other agency could possibly account for it. 8 feet of sediment imply a very great depth of water, and the flood which deposited it must have been of a magnitude unparalleled in local history. That it was so is further proved by the fact that the clay bank marks a definite break in the continuity of the local culture. A whole civilization which existed before it is lacking above it and seems to have been submerged by the waters. There could be no doubt that the flood of which we had thus found the only possible evidence was the flood of Sumerian history and legend, the flood on which is based the story of Noah. A pit sunk 300 yards away to the northwest gave us the same bed of water-laid clay, which beneath it the same flints and painted pottery of the non-Sumerian folk. In this way we can explain the sudden and complete disappearance of the painted pottery, which at one time seems to have been universally distributed over the southern sites. The people who made it, the older inhabitants of the country, were wiped out by the flood. So this is not by a theologian, this is Leonard Woolley, an archaeologist, And this is his thoughts after seeing that 8 feet of clay deposited there. I'm
For a well, or something dig down in those two spots?
They were digging out tombs to begin with, and they had more recent tombs near the top, and as they would clear those, they'd notice there's more beneath that. And then they'd go even lower, and they kept going down. Thank you. All right. And they kept going down, and finally hit this layer of clay, and they dug out a wide area to see, you know, and it was endless. And so they said, let's see how deep it is, and they continued, you know, the 8 feet, and finally broke through, and then their curiosity, they said, let's go way over there, and that probably was more like just a pit, exploratory. But again, they hit the clay, and it was 8 feet deep there too, and so he could be wrong. This is in an area that maybe floods sometimes. You know, they have 100-year floods. There's different places in the world that have that, and this could be evidence of one of those. But I just thought it would be interesting to read this. And you know, imagine that it's possible it relates to the biblical flood. But yeah, it's not, you know, solid proof, and I don't think we need anything other than the Bible as proof. But I do want to call these things to your attention, that they are out there if you're curious about them. I'm going to go back to the tablets just for a minute here. The Babylonian tablet also said, the mountain of the country of Nazir caught the ship and suffered it not to stir. 8:4 said, and the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. So they both are getting caught on a mountain now. When the 7th, this is on the tablet, when the 7th day came, I sent forth, this is wild, I sent forth a dove and let it go. The dove went and returned, a resting place it found not, and turned back. I sent forth a swallow and let it go. The swallow went and returned, a resting place it found not, and it turned back. I sent forth a raven and let it go. The raven went and saw the going down of the waters, and it approached, it waited, it croaked, and did not turn back. Genesis 8:6-12, and it came to pass, the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window. He sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro. The waters were dried up from off the earth. And he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. The dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her and pulled her unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again to him any more. Again, great parallels there. The last one I'm going to read is from the tablet. Then I sent forth everything to the 4 winds. I offered sacrifices. I built an altar on the summit of the mountain. The gods, plural, smelt the savor. the gods smelt the sweet savor. Genesis 8:17, bring forth with thee every living thing that's with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply in the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, after their kinds went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. So the parallels there are incredible, I think, even smelling the sweet savor. I think it's obvious they copied this from the Genesis account. And that's going to be, my thought on the tablets. There's no question which came first. And hey, it's working. Thank you, David. Okay, here's the 1 year. Beverly, you got that right. According to the Septuagint, that's the Greek version of the Bible, I'm quoting here a book, The Patriarchal Age, George Smith, from 1847. He says, according to the Septuagint, then, we understand that the flood began on the 27th day of the second month, that it rained 40 days and 40 nights, that after 150 days the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat on the 27th day of the 7th month, that on the first day of the 10th month the tops of the mountains were seen, and that after the lapse of 4 months and 27 days more, in which the waters abated and the earth was dried, Noah left his sanctuary on the 27th day of the second month, having been in the ark exactly 1 year. And we talked about this. On the 27th day of the second month, God spake to Noah, saying, go forth, not come forth. So when he was leaving the ark, he said, go. The invitation, come thou into the ark, shows that God was the first person to enter the ark. The command, go forth out of the ark, shows that he was the last to leave it. Noah and God had dwelt together in the ark for a full solar year. And that's from Student's Commentary on the Holy Scriptures, George Williams, 1981, on that book. Replenish the earth. Genesis 9:1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. God blessed Noah and his sons. This is from Benson's commentary. He assured them of his good will to them and his gracious intentions concerning them. The first blessing is here renewed, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and repeated in Genesis 9:7. For the race of mankind was, as it were, to begin again. By virtue of this blessing, mankind were to be both multiplied and perpetuated upon the earth, so that in a little time all the habitable parts of the earth should be more or less inhabited. And Genesis 9:18 and 19, and the sons of Noah that went forth from the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. So, replenish the earth is what God told them. Now we get to Genesis 10:12. The generations of Shem, this is a new tablet. We have just read the tablet of Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, if this tablet theory has any substance to it. So I'm using this as kind of a outline and hoping that this tablet theory, there might be something to it. If there is, we now begin not all three sons, but just Shem and his tablet. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. Now, they are burning the brick to harden it. The usual way was to let it bake in the sun. And they were industrious and maybe in a hurry, and they have their way of doing things. And they made these bricks, fired it. And the other thing about this is the bricks are all the same shape, and they're all alike. And I thought this was an interesting comparison. Exodus 20. Oh yeah, I gotta move this. Exodus 20:25 says, And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. The Lord was talking to Moses, and instructions were, if there's an altar built, or to use stones, that you found stones. You don't want to shape them, or you've polluted them. And I liken this to people. The Babylonians would have all people be the same, the bricks. And I think the Lord likes personality and differences. And we each are individuals. And so I think this is a great picture of that they had their bricks and they were going to build a tower to heaven with them. And the Lord, anything He would have constructed would use natural stone, not even shaped with a tool. He will take us as we are, I guess you could look at that. I'm running low on time, I think. Yeah. Whoops, turn that off. I'll keep moving here. Well, let us build a city and a tower. They said, Go, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. Let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Now, see, they're going right against the Lord, saying to go forth and replenish the earth. And now they're going the opposite. They have their own idea. And this goes all the way back to Cain with his sacrifice, the fruit and agriculture. He was going to please the Lord in his own way and do things how mankind thinks they should be done. So here they go again, lest we be scattered, let's build a city and a tower. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the men builded. I did have one picture here. The bottom part of this is a reconstruction. They've, repaired as close they could to what they dug up. This is in Ur. It's called a ziggurat. It's similar to a pyramid. And this dates back to 2100 BC. And the middle part and interior may even be older. But this would be about the same time as the tower and in the same area. So if not this one, one very much like it. In Genesis 11:4 and 5, they said, let us build a city and a tower, lest we be scattered. Yeah, I already read this. I'm going to move on. John Lang again wrote, not only as a visible signal, but by the glory of its fame shall the tower hold them together. This is the expression of the political and popular feeling of antiquity. In the pride of the national spirit, the individual is lost with his strength and his conscience. The individual with his convictions, his freedom, his personality must be wholly sacrificed to the name of uniformity, whether it be worldly or ecclesiastical. So again, the picture of the bricks. People of that time would have everything be the same. So the Lord scattered them and confounded their language. I'm going to move on and finish here. We now get to Terah, Abraham's father's tablet, which runs from Genesis 11:11 to 11:27. And it gives a family, the generations here, from Shem. And you can do some math here. It says Shem begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Arphaxad lived 5 and 30 years and begat Salah. So I'm underlining these numbers. And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Eber lived 4 and 30 years and begat Peleg. So you add the 34, the 30, and the 35, you get 99, and then the 2 years. It's 101 years from the flood to the birth of Peleg. And anyone can do that. And so I bring that up because Peleg is mentioned earlier. Back in Shem's, we already covered Shem's tablet, and Shem mentioned this same family line, only he gives us a little more detail. Arphaxad begat Salah, Salah begat Eber, Eber was born 2 sons, the name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. This might be a reference to the nations being divided and a reference to the scattering. Another theologian, Kyle, explains this expression as referring to the division that took place in the consequence of the building of the Tower of Babel. Had there not been such a division so prominently put forth in the 11th chapter, there might be some room for speculation. See, this is preceding the 11th chapter that describes the tower and then the scattering. But the obvious connection seems to shut out any other view. So he's saying this reference, Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, his name means division, is a reference to the tower and the scattering. And so we can kind of have an idea when that occurred relative to the flood. 101 years after the flood. And lastly, I'm going to close with this. Terah begat Abram. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begat Lot. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. I think it's interesting that their lifespans, Noah was 600 years old, when he had his children, and there's a diminishing, as you read about the generations, they live shorter and shorter. And the Lord said 120 days. And so this is now getting closer to that. Terah lived 205. And now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. That's Genesis 12, 1 and 2. And we're going to continue on there next month. And this is a whole change now. From this historical talking about creation and the flood and the Tower of Babel. Now we're going to talk about Abraham and a whole new program. So if there's any questions, I think it's just 7:30 now, so if you dare ask a couple, I'd be happy to answer. No questions? Yeah?
Aren't there accounts all over a lot of cultures all over the world that have flood accounts?
Yes. Every culture has an account of a flood. So yes, it gives you that confidence. It was a historical event. And I chose to show you one of the many. The Hindu, even the Aztecs and American Indians. Every culture has a flood story. Yes.
If you go visit Lee sometime, on his desk he used to keep a jar of very small marine animal shells that were left behind after they passed, And these are all up on the top of a mountain. And these are normally things that we found at the bottom of the earth,
yeah,
in the sand.
Yeah.
They're in very high concentrations. You can pick them up and look at the different, I would say, there's things that look like starfish and other things like that were all taken right off the top.
Yeah. Now, there's two ways to look at something like that. And the one way would be the flood was worldwide, and these are left on top of a mountain as a result of the flood. In some cases, they're not just shells from what I think, relatively speaking, is not a long time ago when the flood occurred, maybe 2500 BC. Abraham lived around 2000 BC, and when we start talking about Adam and Eve and going back to the beginning, maybe 6000 BC and like that, then this is that touchy subject where we want to discuss, is the earth old? Or do we have a young earth? And those shells that you talk about that are found on the tops of mountains, sometimes they're not just shells, but actually fossilized in the form of fossil. And you might even be on top of a mountain and see them in layers of sediment, layers and layers of shells, and wonder how they got there. And so, I don't want to really comment too much on that particular subject. I know of theories that allow the earth to be old and Scripture to be factual and truthful. And I avoided discussing those last month just to keep things running smoothly. There are a lot of theories out there, and so I'll just leave it up to you to decide, how those shells got there to the top of the mountain. But yeah, I'd like to talk to anyone about, the various theories, but maybe in a different setting.
Do you have any idea how many people, if it was 100 years from the flood to the Tower of Babel,
Yeah,
and they all supposedly lived long enough to
Yeah.
be that 100 years later,
yeah.
how many people were procreated after the flood, and how many were at the building of the Tower of Babel?
Yeah, that's a good question. It starts with Noah getting off the boat, and if it's 101 years to Peleg, which would be the tower and the scattering, we have to think about, they give this line of, is it Shem to Peleg? But there's the other brothers as well. Ham and Japheth also had families going on down.
And they usually don't mention the women, so there's a lot of births that aren't recorded.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and grandchildren, children, and grandchildren. I think you could do a comparison and do the math, and I did read some commentaries, and time is, I can't include everything, and it is in the commentaries how many people they can actually do the math and come pretty close, but I'm sorry I didn't.
I've never realized it was only 100 years.
Yeah, and this is also a learning experience for me. I purposely don't study these lessons. For example, the upcoming one, I haven't started the study yet, and I did this each time. I'm familiar with archaeology, because I got some experience digging, and I'm very familiar with maybe the time of David and the Babylonians and so forth. But this studying creation and teaching it, and the ark and the tower, this has really been fun for me, all brand new and fresh. I mean, an hour before I came here, I was still typing in things and pulling things out of books, and I purposely do that. I want to have it be a fresh study. So come next month and see what I can, what I find about Abraham and in the 12th chapter here. Any other questions?
In older civilizations, I know archaeology often digs down,
Yeah.
and around here, I look around and it's like we have dumps for our trash.
Yep.
And it seems like in the old days, they just keep layering on top of each other. How does that work?
Yeah.
As opposed to having a depository for the refuse.
Yeah.
As opposed to just,
Yeah.
it seems unlikely that you'd have hundreds of feet of excavation on the same site to me.
Yeah. Well, it's the culture of the day was warlike, and the cities were usually cities because they had a protection, and everyone went behind the protection of the wall. And then when a force like Egypt or someone, Assyria or Babylonians, were strong enough to knock that wall down and burn the city, and then they made it their own, and they just kind of flattened out and built on that,
Okay,
and
so
then
the site
it
was
over and over.
the good site, but they just
Yep.
leveled the old one.
Yep. And the site, the original city, the site was chosen usually because of water. There's a spring there or something, and also strategic. Maybe it's up on a little bit of a hill or where they can see, and it's hard to get up there even before they built the wall. And so, yeah, the people that take it tend to stay right there and build on top of the. And also, the trash often was thrown over the wall, and so there's that element too on the outside.
That makes a little more sense. So there's only a few spots that would have that kind of an excavation possible even now.
Yeah. Yeah, usually a city is about 7 to 10 acres. It's just a mound, like a big Walmart parking lot, you know, and then you define the wall, outer wall, you find the gates, and usually a palace or a temple on the inside, and they're all pretty much the same from the Bronze Age, early Bronze Age, through the Roman period.
Now, is Jerusalem unique? I hear there's a lot of catacombs or a lot of caves or
Yeah,
underneath the city.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
because of defenses, or was that natural, or was that built partly by nature?
All of that. Some of it is natural because Jerusalem happens to be in an area of limestone, different hardness, Milka, and I forget the names of the other ones, but the softer limestone, even water can kind of make caves and tunnels in it, natural erosion, and sometimes they expanded on that, made it bigger and could run through them, and other...
Well, David put that water shaft.
Yeah, that's exactly... I've been through that area, maybe even the same shaft, and yeah, part of that is natural and part man-made. So, yeah, Jerusalem also, the interesting thing about Jerusalem, archaeologically speaking, is when they destroyed Jerusalem, I mentioned the limestone, they destroyed Jerusalem. I mean, they would mow it down right to the bedrock, you know, just like this carpet. There's nothing left. So the archaeologists get frustrated, and some of the skeptics say David and Solomon never even existed because they don't find much to prove they did. And but the fun part is on the sides. The Kidron Valley, and the Jerusalem had a wall above the Gihon Spring with David's palace up there, and if you dig up there, you're just going to find limestone, bedrock, but if you can dig along that side of that, it's where things were pushed over. So it's a little bit a different type of archaeology because you're not digging in the strata and can easily date by, you know, going lower and lower. This is things all jumbled up and pushed over. But there's still great things to find there, and if you can interpret them by their type of manufacture or the paint on them or things like that, you can learn a lot about what was up above. For example, the coins all along the bottom of the Kidron Valley there by the Gihon Spring, Greek coins, and the handles of the wine amphora, 450 handles stamped from the island of Rhodes, you know. And so here the top is wiped out. You can't find any clues what was there, but along the side you find all the coins and the wine amphora, evidence of the Greeks having their Acre fortress there. And you find evidence of David and Solomon too down along the side under where the palace was. And
One other question I had about
yeah.
Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Has it really been explored? Because I understand it's in an area that's kind of restricted to Westerners because it's partly owned by Russia and partly by Turkey or something? Or?
Yeah. There's been every attempt to find the Ark, and yeah, there are places you can't even go to look. And some of the interpretations of the mountains of Ararat, they think it's not even those two peaks, that it's a whole different area. You know, only the Lord and the Spirit will allow the Ark to be found, and who knows where. It could be any, you know, a huge area. And I don't like it when Bob Cornuke says he found the ark and these men get their pictures taken by these natural formations in the earth and get their pictures taken by those ballast stones, they call them, with the holes in them. They're after the glory, I think, and we want truth. And it's awesome that we know where to find that, and we have to be very cautious anything outside of Scripture.
Aren't there some glaciers too on Mount Ararat too that could be hiding?
Yeah, and in God's time, I think we may see more evidence, but for now I think all we have is the Babylonians copied the same tablets that Moses copied and we have today. And so I'm so thankful we have Scripture. And so we always can rely on that. Beth?
I think it's interesting that the major things that people look for, like the ark, the bigger things, the Ark of the Covenant, and then that the Lord has purposely hidden from man so they don't become objects of worship.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on His Word, but then He allows archaeological digs only confirm the Word when things are found. They only confirm God's Word.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, there's just enough there to let us know, it's true, but we don't need those to know it's true, but, He allows those to be found. And
Yeah, I think that is great too. He gives us just enough and allows us to rely on our faith. And otherwise, we wouldn't have that opportunity. But yeah, more and more lately, we've been able to reinforce our faith with some of these awesome finds. So I even think this tablet, I didn't realize how close to the Genesis account the Babylonian account was. The Gilgamesh epic is, with the dove going out the window and coming back, and the offering, and the gods smelling the sweet savor, just almost word for word. It really gives me confidence in the book of Genesis. Well, I guess that'll probably do it for tonight. Thank you all for coming out on a stormy night, and I'm wondering if Nate, would you mind closing in prayer for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that we come out here tonight, Lord, and open your word and put some physical evidence, Lord, behind what you've already said and we know to be true, Lord, to help remove doubt if people have it, or to answer the skeptics and the critics and take them in their own folly. Lord, we are so thankful to be able to do this in a country that allows us to, and that hopefully through studies like this and ongoing study of your word, that we can be better equipped to be light for you, Lord, in this present darkness. Help us as we go through this week to live for you and honor you and try to be that light and share your gospel with anyone we might be able to. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.